I didn't mean to stare at her hand that long. But when she passed me the wrench, her fingers brushed mine, and it felt like I was the one who'd been fixed instead of the broken sink. That was the first time I really noticed her, my girlfriend's older sister. Her name was Clara, and she was nothing like her younger sister. Where Emily was quick, scattered, always rushing through sentences, Clara was measured. Every movement, every word, felt considered, as if she knew that silence had its own weight. She was older, mid-40s maybe, but there was something about the way she carried herself that made me feel like I was still learning how to stand properly. I'd only come over to help with a leaky pipe. I was no expert, just a guy with a borrowed toolbox and more confidence than skill. But Clara had opened the door herself, not Emily. She wore a simple gray sweater, sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair tied back loosely. Not done up, not trying. And that's what disarmed me. "You're early," she'd said, voice low, like she didn't want the walls to hear. "Better than flooding the kitchen, right?" I joked, trying not to notice how her eyes lingered a second too long. She didn't laugh. Not exactly. Just the faintest curl at the corner of her lips before she stepped aside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Emily had texted me she'd be late, that her sister would let me in. I hadn't thought much of it until I found myself alone in the kitchen with Clara, kneeling under the sink while she leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't ask about my day, or about Emily. Just watched. The kind of gaze that made me hyper-aware of every movement, my hands gripping the wrench too tightly, my shoulders stiff, my back brushing against the cabinet door. I tried to cover it with words. "You know, if this doesn't work, we might need an actual plumber." "Maybe," she said, and I could feel her eyes on the side of my face. "But you're trying." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. As if the act of trying meant something more than fixing pipes. I tightened the valve, tested the water. A small victory, the leak slowed to a drip. I exhaled, sat back on the floor, wiping my hands on a rag. She crouched down beside me, closer than I expected, inspecting my work. I caught the faint smell of her perfume, something warm, subtle, like cedarwood. "You did better than I thought," she murmured. I glanced at her, surprised by the softness in her voice. Her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching. I should have looked away. I didn't. Seconds stretched. The sound of the faucet dripping filled the silence between us. I cleared my throat. "Guess I passed the test then?" Her lips curved, but not into a smile. Something sharper, something I couldn't name. She reached out, touched the edge of the pipe with one fingertip, then let her hand fall, but not before the back of her fingers grazed against my knee. I froze. She didn't apologize. Didn't move back. Just let the moment hang there, as if daring me to breathe first. Then she said it, soft, almost under her breath. "Emily has no idea, does she?" The room went too quiet again. My throat tightened. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't sure if she meant the sink, or me. I should have laughed it off. I should have pretended I didn't hear her, that her words were nothing more than a passing comment. But the way Clara said it, low, deliberate, lodged in my chest like a nail I couldn't pull out. Emily has no idea. No idea about what? The sink? Or the way her sister's hand had lingered on my knee, just enough to remind me she knew it was there? I forced myself to move, to stand, to break the spell. "Well, the leak's mostly gone. Guess that's something." She rose slower, more graceful, brushing invisible dust from her sweater. "It is," she said, eyes still on me. "But I don't think that's what I meant." Her words left a crack in the air, and I didn't know how to seal it. I'd only known Clara in pieces before this, Emily's older sister who lived alone after her divorce, who worked too much, who rarely joined family dinners. She always carried herself with this quiet authority, the kind of presence that made you straighten your back when she walked into the room. But now, standing in that kitchen, she felt different. Looser somehow, though there was an edge in her gaze, as if she was daring me to step closer or run. I tried to distract myself, to focus on the little things. The faint smear of flour on her sleeve. Had she been baking earlier? The way one strand of hair had slipped free of her bun and curved against her cheek. How she tapped her thumb against her folded arms, like she was holding herself together. Dangerous, I told myself. She was older. She was Emily's sister. She had a history, a weight in her eyes that spoke of mistakes made and lived with. I shouldn't even be noticing these things. And yet I couldn't stop. You don't let people help you often, do you? I asked, surprising even myself. Her brows lifted slightly. Why do you say that? Because you stood there the whole time. Watching. Like if you blinked I'd break something. She laughed, not loudly, but enough to shift the air between us. Maybe I just don't trust easily anymore. The anymore hung heavy. And for the first time, I saw something fragile under her composure. Regret, maybe? Or longing for something she'd convinced herself she couldn't have. I wanted to ask who hurt you. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, pretending her words hadn't landed somewhere deep. I packed up the toolbox slowly, dragging out the moment, though I couldn't admit why. My pulse was uneven, my thoughts louder than they should have been. She noticed. Of course she did. Clara always seemed to notice more than she said. Don't rush, she murmured, stepping closer. Her hand brushed against my arm this time, light but deliberate. I swear the room tilted with that touch. I looked at her, really looked at her, and almost asked the question burning at the back of my throat, what are you doing? But before I could, she tilted her head, her voice soft but steady. Stay a little longer. I should have left. That would have been the smart move, the only move, really. But Clara's voice, low and certain, pinned me in place. Stay a little longer. I tried to play it off with a half-smile, setting the wrench back in the toolbox. What for? The sink's holding up, for now. Her eyes didn't move from mine. Does there have to be a reason? The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound of water dripping earlier. I wanted to answer, but my throat closed up. Instead, I sat back against the counter, buying myself a second to breathe. She stood close enough that I could see the faint line of tiredness beneath her eyes, the way her sweater fell a little off her shoulder as she leaned forward. It was too much. I don't think I should. I started. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. A shrill, ordinary sound that cut straight through the charged air. She didn't move to answer. Just glanced at it, screen lighting up with a name I didn't recognize, then dimming again. Her lips pressed tight. Some things can wait. That was the moment, right there, when I realized how wrong this was. Emily trusted me. Clara was... Clara. She carried years I didn't understand, shadows I hadn't lived through. And yet, when she shifted closer, brushing past me as though she needed to reach the cabinet, my hand lifted on its own, just to steady her. Or maybe to feel her. Her sweater was softer than I expected. My fingers caught the edge of her sleeve for half a second too long. She froze. I froze. She turned her head, slowly, and our faces were suddenly inches apart. Her eyes searched mine, not hurried, not afraid, just searching, like she was trying to see if I'd step away or let the moment swallow us both. The sound of footsteps upstairs made us both flinch. Emily. My chest tightened. No, she wasn't home yet. She'd said she was late. The footsteps were from the tenant in the apartment above. Still, the illusion cracked, reminding me of where we were, who we were. I pulled my hand back quickly, shoving it into my pocket. I should probably, get going before what? She asked quietly. Her voice didn't accuse. It invited. I swallowed, staring at the floor. Before this gets complicated. A pause. Long enough that I almost convinced myself the moment was over. Then I felt it, her fingers, light against the back of my hand where it rested on my knee. Not a grip, not a demand. Just a touch. Deliberate. Dangerous. My breath caught. My thoughts scattered. Every reason I had to leave suddenly felt paper-thin against the weight of her touch. She leaned closer, so close I could feel the warmth of her breath near my ear. Complicated, she whispered. Or honest? And I didn't know which scared me more. Her question hung in the air, sharp, impossible. Complicated or honest? I should have laughed, should have shrugged it off like a bad joke. But her hand was still on mine, light but steady, and my pulse betrayed me. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Clara. Her name came out rough, like gravel in my throat. She tilted her head, studying me the way someone studies a painting they're not supposed to touch, but already has. You don't have to say anything, she whispered. I can see it. I shook my head quickly, but the words wouldn't follow. All I could do was stare at her, at the faint creases by her eyes, the kind you earn from years of both laughter and sleepless nights. At the way she didn't flinch from the silence, but leaned into it, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment to arrive. It's not fair, I muttered finally, surprising myself. Her brows lifted. To who? To Emily. To you. To me. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated how unsteady it sounded. Something flickered in her expression, pain maybe, or recognition. She looked away then, down at the floor, her hands slipping from mine. For a second I thought the spell was broken. But when she spoke again, her voice was lower, almost trembling. Do you think I don't ask myself that? Every day? That undid me. Because it wasn't some smooth, dangerous line, it was raw. Honest. And I felt it like a punch. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I hadn't been thinking of her at all. But that would have been the biggest lie I'd ever told. She'd seen me. From the first moment. I can't stop noticing you, I admitted before I could swallow it back. The way you watch. The way you. I trailed off, ashamed of how much I'd already said. Her eyes shot back to mine, wide, unblinking. For once, she didn't hide behind her composure. Don't, she said softly. Unless you mean it. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were pushing us together. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the patter of rain against the window. Every sound magnified the silence between us. Her hand hovered, as if she wanted to reach for me again but couldn't quite cross the last inch. My own hand twitched with the same instinct, fighting the gravity between us. If I leaned in, it would all be over. If I stepped back, I'd never forgive myself. The front door creaked. A draft of cold air slipped through the hallway. I froze, heart slamming. Emily? No, just the wind pushing at a latch. But the reminder was enough to leave both of us locked in place, either moving, either daring to break the fragile thread between us. Finally, Clara whispered, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Tell me, do you want me to stop? And her eyes held mine, waiting, demanding an answer I wasn't sure I could give. Her words, do you want me to stop, echoed inside me like a bell that wouldn't quiet. My mouth opened, but before I could answer, her phone buzzed again on the counter. Same number. Same name. She glanced at it, and this time I saw her jaw tighten. She didn't reach for it. She just let it ring, eyes never leaving mine. Clara, I said carefully. You keep ignoring that. Who is it? She hesitated too long. Then, doesn't matter. Yes, it does. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she looked away, arms folding across her chest like armor. It's someone I shouldn't have let back in. I waited, not moving. My ex. she admitted finally. He thinks there's something left to salvage. He calls, he shows up, he doesn't hear me when I say no. And Emily. She stopped herself, biting the inside of her cheek. And Emily what? I pressed. Her eyes snapped back to mine, guarded. She thinks I'm still in love with him. That's what she tells people. That's why she doesn't worry about me. The words landed like a blade. So Emily didn't just see me as safe, she thought Clara was taken care of, wrapped up in some story that wasn't true. That's not fair, I whispered. Clara gave a humorless laugh. Fair doesn't matter. Perception does. And if she ever even guessed about this, about us standing here right now, there is no us. I cut in, though the words felt like ash in my mouth. She flinched. Just barely. But enough. The air between us shifted, less electric now, more fragile, like glass already cracked. I hated myself for saying it, but I hated the truth in it even more. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. That's what scares me. Because I don't know how to stop thinking about you. And if I admit that out loud, then there is an US. Whether we touch or not. Her eyes softened then, a flicker of something unguarded. She whispered, You think I don't feel the same? The phone buzzed again, vibrating across the counter. Louder this time. Without breaking eye contact, Clara grabbed it and silenced the call. Then she set it face down, hand trembling slightly. You're not supposed to be the one I can't ignore, she said. The words cracked something open in me, because she wasn't denying it anymore. I stepped in before I could think better of it, close enough to see the pulse fluttering at her throat. Close enough to reach out, though I didn't. Not yet. Then what am I? I asked. She didn't answer. Didn't move. Just looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not of me, but of herself. The silence swelled, heavy and dangerous, until it felt like the only thing left between us was the truth waiting to break free. What am I? The question slipped out of me before I could pull it back, and now it hung there, heavier than anything else we'd said. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. She pressed her hand to the counter as if to steady herself. You're the mistake I shouldn't want, she whispered finally. But the one I can't seem to push away. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even an excuse. It was a wound, laid bare between us. I stepped closer, reckless now. Then stopped trying to push. Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide, shimmering with something between fear and hunger. For a long moment neither of us breathed. I thought she'd shove me back, that she'd retreat into that cool, guarded silence she always carried like armor. But instead, she let the air close between us until our shoulders brushed. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. Just the raw ache of proximity, the kind that steals every rational thought from your head. Do you know what this would do to her? Clara's voice cracked on Emily's name. To my own sister? To you? Yes, I said, even though I didn't fully know. But I also know I can't keep pretending this isn't here. Her hand trembled as she reached for me, hesitant at first, then firmer, fingertips grazing my jaw like she was afraid I'd disappear if she touched me too hard. You're so young, she murmured. And you've lived enough for both of us, I answered. That broke something in her. A sound escaped her throat, half laugh, half sob, before she closed the last inch and kissed me. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't clean. It was messy, desperate, her lips pressing hard like she was punishing herself even as she gave in. I kissed her back because I couldn't not, because all the nights I'd told myself I imagined it were proven wrong in one heartbeat. When we pulled apart, our foreheads touched, both of us breathing hard. Neither of us could look away. This is real, I whispered. She shut her eyes tight, shaking her head. It can't be. But it is. For a long time she didn't move. Then, finally, she opened her eyes again, raw and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. If we do this, she said, we can't undo it. I held her gaze. Then don't ask me to. The rain outside hammered harder against the windows, a storm rising while we stood in the quiet wreckage of our choice. Clara cupped my face with both hands, her thumbs trembling against my skin. You'll regret me someday. Or maybe, I said softly, you'll regret not letting me love you. The silence after that was the loudest yet, charged, unanswerable. But in her eyes, in the way she didn't pull away this time, I knew the decision had already been made. We weren't walking back from this. Morning light always has a way of making last night feel like a dream. But as I stood in Clara's kitchen, watching steam curl from the mug she just set in front of me, I knew this wasn't one of those moments I could shrug off or rewrite in my head. It had happened. We had happened. And now there was no going back. Neither of us spoke for a while. Words felt too fragile, too small for what had shifted between us. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, though. It was calm. Honest. Clara sat across from me, hair falling loose around her face, the same sweater from the night before hanging off one shoulder. She looked tired, a little scared, but there was something else there too. Peace, maybe? So, she said quietly. What now? I stared down into my coffee. I didn't have a clean answer. We both knew the truth. Emily would find out eventually. People would talk. We'd have to answer questions we didn't want to, explain things we couldn't fully explain ourselves. But for the first time since this started, the idea of facing all that didn't feel impossible. I don't know, I admitted. But I don't regret it. Her eyes lifted to mine. A small, fragile smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Neither do I. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't the kind of line that belonged in a movie. But it was real, and that was enough. We spent the next hour talking, about the mess we were walking into, about how we need to be careful, about how we'd tell Emily the truth instead of hiding in shadows. It wasn't easy. Some of it hurt to say out loud. But we said it anyway, because anything less would have meant last night was a mistake. And neither of us wanted that. Somewhere in that conversation, I realized how much had changed. Clara wasn't just the woman I couldn't stop thinking about. She wasn't a fantasy or a forbidden thought I'd buried deep. She was a person, flawed, bruised, terrified of being hurt again, but willing to try. And I wasn't just the younger man orbiting around her anymore. I was someone who'd seen her fully, who'd chosen her anyway. Love isn't always neat. It isn't always right by the world's standards. Sometimes it starts in silence and ends with a storm. But if it's honest, if it's born from the rawest parts of who we are, then maybe that's enough. As I reached across the table and laced my fingers with hers, Clara didn't pull away. She squeezed back. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a risk. It felt like a choice. One we were making together. And that's how it all began. Thought Balloon, did you enjoy the story? What part surprised you the most? Their first touch, their confession, or the choice they made in the end? Sparkles, what kind of stories would you like to hear next? Something forbidden and slow burn like this one, or something completely different?